Okay, so we can all agree this show was amazing, but let's dig into the specifics. But we're going to be diving into some major spoiler territory, so don't at me in the comments. If you haven't watched the show and don't want spoilers, there's a spoiler-free video linked down in the description of why I think you'll love it. If you keep watching beyond this point, well, you've been warned. We good? Okay, cool. Let the rambling begin. There's just so much they did right, but there's also some things that messed up and some things that were just no. Let's get the bad and ugly out of the way first so we can focus on all the awesome aspects of the show. There were some weird implications of the relationship between Boss and Miranjo that I don't want to get too into, but it was a bit confusing as to whether he viewed her as a daughter, a friend-zoned bestie, I don't know. And Baby Girl didn't make it any easier, like she clearly feels an immense debt to him for saving her life, and even though he's portrayed as more of her surrogate father figure, there's definitely some one-sided romantic feelings that develop, but in like the most absolutely toxic way possible. This chick is like, oh, you want to be stronger even though you're literally the strongest person on earth except actual gods? Let me introduce you to my childhood best friend who I swore I would never exploit because he's a total sweetheart who just wants friends that don't take advantage of him and force him to change into a heartless monster over time. He can grant wishes that totally don't make him lose his soul and sanity a little bit each time. Oh, and it's totally cool to sacrifice another family member, even your unborn child, just to get a quick hit of gem juice you get that new PR, big dog. Like,
what?
I get she's broken, but you would think this chick would be the most understanding and compassionate person when it came to innocence, especially children. But nope, her self-imposed duty to Boss just makes her act like a straight-up villain. And this isn't necessarily a flaw in itself. She can be a villain. But the character later on, well, we'll come back to that. After he heartlessly agrees to the pact, he finds himself a giant muscle mommy and makes a baby that he knows is going to be cursed. Upon seeing the child, however, we see a change in heart. Boss, who was obsessed with gaining more power at any cost, now saw the consequences of his selfish greed. He vows to give up his endless wandering and forms a kingdom so he can provide for his family, which includes Miranjo. Was she happy that her savior and idol finally found happiness and meaningful duty? Nope. She thinks he's gone soft and that if she just gently pushes him in the right direction by, killing his family and overthrowing his kingdom, he'll be able to go back to his wandering and be even happier. Then years later when he dies, she decides all on her own to secretly resurrect him, forcing his soul into the body of his son by making an unholy turducken smoothie and force-feeding it to him. And this girl thought he was going to be so hyped like it was Christmas and she surprised him by paying off his student loans. Okay, so let's skip to the part of the show where Boss, after fighting Bojji, realizes his son has become strong enough to rule, I guess. It's never really made clear why he went from trying to secretly stop Miranjo to deciding he's just going to rule all over again and anyone who goes against that idea, which, by the way, would make sense considering he's actually going against his own will, just gets instantly pancaked. He randomly convinces Miranjo to join him in accepting their deaths. Miranjo's soul gets intercepted like a pass from Josh Allen, and Daida quickly asks his wish to be granted, namely saving and restoring her. Being trapped in his own mind and body, he bonded with the childlike memory of Miranjo inside Boss's subconscious, which helps humble him and, stop being such a spoiled, entitled, murderous punk. In the process, he catches feelings for this cute little girl, especially once he learns this is the person who's been guiding him for years. I guess he doesn't seem to care that she was manipulating him entirely just to kill him and steal his body, or that she attempted several times to murder his own mother, or manipulated him into almost killing his brother. He learned his lesson, sure, but he's also like 11 to 14-ish years old, so it makes sense for someone like him to so easily develop a crush and also be groomed. It's kind of hard to hold it against him once he comes to his senses and shows sincere regret and sorrow over what he's done. But Miranjo kinda doesn't, and everyone just forgives her anyway, despite the fact that literally seconds ago, she was trying to unalive everyone in the story. It was only after Boss talked her out of the plan and Daida stole the wish from Despot to revive his little crush, and then immediately proposed marriage, that her guilt truly overwhelmed her. But guilt alone isn't the same as repentance. And I'm hoping in future seasons she lives up to the mercy and forgiveness she's been shown, because at the end of the show it felt a bit forced. It felt like it was trying to send the message of overcoming adversity and trauma without allowing it to permanently shape your person, but ended up kind of showing that there aren't any consequences to your action as long as you're a past victim yourself. Like, it just excuses you. That's something we see all too often in our world, so I wasn't a fan of that precedent being set. Also, there's the anime trope of the older person being trapped in a younger body and falling for an even younger person that really needs to stop. Miranjo is somewhere around her 30s or 40s, even though her body was restored to her prime, so figure like 20-ish. Meanwhile, Daida is a literal child. He might be the king and mature for his age, but he's a few years younger than Bojji, who is portrayed as a young teen. So Daida is realistically somewhere between 11 and 14 at most. This age gap would make Leonardo DiCaprio hesitate, and the show doesn't even acknowledge it. That's weird, and that's a whole thing that's becoming more mainstream and normalized in anime. It needs to stop. When this happens in real life, people rightfully go to prison, unless you're Ezra Miller. So the media we're consuming shouldn't be normalizing or glorifying it. Anyways, that's all the negative I have for the show. Let's get into all the awesome sauce. I love that the show kept you guessing constantly, whether it was plot twists or character reveals. I didn't see the Domas betrayal coming, and was pleasantly surprised to see Bebin turn out to be a good guy. Dorsha became one of my favorites, despite not necessarily being as smart or skilled as the other members of the Big Four, because he was one of the few characters, like Bojji and Queen Hylian, that had an absolutely indomitable spirit. The man didn't know quit. Hylian might be a contender for my favorite character. She was the biggest undercover softie and was the most selfless person in the entire story. She just gave and gave of herself, often literally in the case of her healing magic, to protect everyone around her. She was strict and came off as cold sometimes, but we see it was with purpose. She was trying to raise strong boys who would become future rulers, so she didn't want to be too soft on them. She's one of the only ones that treated Bojji somewhat normal, even learning sign language and teaching it to others. She never babied him or treated him like a lesser person, even if she did discount his potential initially. I liked Kage as a ride or die, but I wish they would have given him more of his own personality aside from being Bojji's cheerleader. We got some of his backstory, which is great, but he just felt like insert side character here instead of his own person. I'm looking forward to what's next for him, because I feel like he deserves more time, and I'm really curious about the Shadow Clan. Like, where are they from? Do they all look like LeBron's pillow stain? Because it was mentioned their appearance is because of a curse, so what is their original form? I'd love to see what their kingdom was like, and maybe if there's a few survivors from the Purge that end up starting anew. Despa was such a fun twist on this story of demigods and superhuman soldiers. He's just a fluffy rich boy with an even fluffier horsey who inherited his father's insight. That's it. But when you get Chris Sabat to voice him, it's instantly going to be great.
Do not fear, I am here.
The training arc with Bojji was exciting, and I thought it was really creative how they made him stronger without being able to actually increase his physical strength. Bojji became arguably the strongest fighter in the world by accepting his weaknesses but focusing on his strengths. He believed in himself, even when the majority of his world didn't. He held no grudges to anyone, despite several people trying to murder him and his loved ones. He knew the importance of having a close friend you can rely on, and what it means to be a friend. He learned not to blindly trust everyone, but to also allow everyone the opportunity to be trusted and forgiven. Through Bojji, we learn that inner strength and conviction is infinitely stronger than physical strength, and that learning to overcome adversities, trauma, and betrayal is possible. Oftentimes, the most messed up people were victims of something horrible in their childhood, but they never got the help they needed. Terrible things happen, and people can be cruel and hurtful or dismissive, but we have control over whether we choose to grow from the adversities or allow them to shape us into the kind of person that would continue the cycle. We don't need to be a victim. Even the strongest person you know has flaws and needs support or encouragement at times. It's okay to not always feel strong. It's okay to break down sometimes, and it's okay to cry. What's important is getting back up. Bojji cries a lot in this series, and yet, unlike a lot of other main characters, it never becomes annoying or forced. This kid is going through the hardest times of his life, and we feel his pain and frustration. The fact that they wrote a character who was deaf and mute, but looked like he was drawn with MS Paint, and yet still made your eyes get a little sweaty, is just how good the writing, animating, and voice acting is. Even though they kinda yada-yada'd how people can somehow know exactly what Bojji is saying when he ooga-boogas,
What have I got?
it's really nice to see the struggles of someone who was born with less and yet doesn't need it. There's a scene where Bebin takes Daida to the market after he hears Daida trash his brother for being weak. He shows him a man who, like Bojji, is deaf, but this old man is also blind. Daida comments how pointless living like that would be, and he wouldn't go on if he was given that fate. Bebin then points out how Daida essentially just said he's too weak to live in Bojji's world, and that strength isn't necessarily what he thinks it is. I also love the pacing of the story. You're slowly presented with this ever-expanding story, but always given just enough to keep you wanting more. Aside from the last couple episodes, which honestly felt like it was written by different writers from the rest of the show, the characters are all consistent and well thought out. As wild as this world is, the plot still makes sense. I loved how nearly every main character showed some kind of growth and complexity over the course of the story. And the music, dear lord, the music. I can't play it for copyright reasons, but being the good guy that I am, I've linked the opening and ending songs down in the description for your viewing/listening pleasure. They're so whimsical and enchanting, and somehow also feel like a natural fit for this medieval-style fantasy world. But my absolute favorite thing about this show, it's got heart. It has so much heart. I enjoy a good underdog story like most people, but the characters aren't always super likable or relatable. And while I'm not deaf or mute and can legally ride on roller coasters, there's few characters I have personally felt connected to more than Bojji. He's so sweet and pure and refuses to change to fit the corrupt world he lives in. He demands more respect and admiration than any other character, and it's because of his character and his infectious positivity and determination. He's just the absolute best, and I can't wait to see what adventures and crazy antics he gets into next. Anyways, that's all I've got for now. I would put this one in the masterpiece category, and highly recommend it to anyone who enjoys a great underdog story. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite aspect of the show was, or if you have a show you think is underrated and deserves more attention. If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with your friends. Take care, and have a great day, you beautiful beasts.